Hi everybody, this is Stephanie. I am a member of the regional clubs team at the Yale Alumni Association and the host of Yale Alumni Live, which is what you're watching right now. We took some time off in the month of July, but we're really excited to be back with two special guests today and again next week with our ECHO intern, Amy Rodriguez, who will be joining me any moment. She is a local student in the New Haven area and is going to be doing some interviews here with me on Yale Alumni Live. So I'm really excited to have her here with us today, joined by Dwayne Betts, who is a poet and Yale Law grad. So we're really excited to kick things off this month of August. And they're going to be joining me any moment, so let me try and pull them in. We also have a number of really exciting guests coming this fall, so please check back with us. I'm going to see if I can pull Amy in here now. Amy's got a great story to share, so I'm very excited for you all to meet her in just a moment, along with Mr. Dwayne Betts, who many of you know has won several awards for his unbelievable poetry, so we're very excited here with us. So give me a minute to get them here, and then we're going to hear their stories like we always do on Yale Alumni Live. You know, if there is an amazing Yaley out there that you would like us to share their story, please let us know in the comments or in our DMs. Hi, Amy. Can you hear me?
Hello. Hi.
Yay, I'm so excited you're here. So, Amy, we're going to try and pull Dwayne in just a second. But before we do, I would love it if you could introduce yourself to everybody and just give us a little information about what you've been doing this past year and kind of your experience at Metro.
Okay. So hi, everyone. I am a recent Metropolitan Business Academy graduate. MBA for short. It is a local New Haven business school, which is quite surprising because I'm not much of a business person. Probably should have gone to an art school, but I don't regret it whatsoever. It is a tight-knit community where you can really get to know the teachers, and they also have great ways to get introduced to the New Haven community, of course, like Echo Perfect 10. I've been an intern at Echo Perfect 10 for about 2 years now. My first internship was at WOW Creative Design Group, where I worked. I did some logos for local businesses. We work with like local New Haven companies where we can make t-shirts for them, bags, any kind of merch. But we also sort of branch out to movies. And at some point, I think I had a project where I had to look for houses for actors and crew that were working on a movie in Connecticut. I know. I don't know if I can mention it. I think it's like sort of a secret. So I won't say who and I won't say the movie. But it was a great experience. And now, of course, I'm interning for YAA. And my job was to look for people to interview, of course, Yale alumni. And today we're going to be interviewing Reginald Dwayne Betts, which I'm really excited about. And yes, so I graduated and I'll be going to Eastern Connecticut State University where I plan on majoring in psychology.
Thanks, Amy. We're really excited to have you. And as everybody knows, we've been looking for incredible Yale alumni to share their stories on Yale Alumni Live for the past year and a half now, since we've been home in many cases. And Amy came to me earlier this summer and we were talking about incredible stories to share. And I said to her, Amy, is there any Yaley that has impacted your life or your education in any way? And that's when she immediately told me about Reginald Dwayne Betts. And Amy, why don't you just give a little bit of background about your experience with Dwayne, and we'll get him up on the camera. We're working on that now. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about your experience.
Of course. So my teacher, Miss Natalia from Metro, she took me aside into like a Zoom meeting and she told me, Amy, I have this opportunity for you. It's going to be a Hopkins poetry workshop with Dwayne Betts. And to be completely honest, beforehand, I did not know who he was, but she did tell me a little bit about his story and what he does, that he's a writer. And immediately I was like, yes. I think maybe a few weeks back, I had presented a poem for an Earth Day event in front of City Hall in New Haven. So I was like, okay, I can sharpen up on my poetry skills a bit and maybe get a few critiques from a professional. So I went to take the class, and it was incredible. It was me and also 9 other students from my high school alongside 10 students from Hopkins. He took us through this like very smooth process where I think in the beginning we had an opener, and I managed to share out even though I was quite nervous. But overall, it was great, and actually getting to know his background as well really spoke to me, and I never forgot it. So afterwards, a peer of mine actually reached out to him to ask if he could be a commencement speaker at my high school graduation, and he said yes. And I was amazed. I congratulated her as well because I know that can be very stressful to, ask someone and maybe they might say no. But luckily he did say yes, and so he was our commencement speaker. It was an amazing speech, and I'm sure that my peers and I are going to remember that forever.
It's amazing. I'm just so happy that we were able to pull this all together today. So Dwayne is here. He's having a little trouble joining. So as this happens in the virtual world, we all are like on mute sometimes, or our cameras don't work. So bear with me for a minute, everybody, while we get him on the camera. We all can relate to that, I'm sure, over the past year and a half, right? So Dwayne, I sent you a request to join. There's a camera at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Click that and you should be able to join us on camera. So we're going to try this, everybody. Just bear with us for a minute. Instagram loves to mix things up. So we're going to try this again and see if we can get him on here. And Amy, you didn't know I was going to do this, but this is what happens when we're live. We have to like figure out what we're going to do. So can you remember any moment during the commencement speech that maybe really spoke to you, something that he talked about that you could share with us?
Well, of course, his story. Him being incarcerated around the same age that we all were, 17, 18, and also the fact that he always wanted to be a commencement speaker at a high school. So it was quite fulfilling for both him and also the kids who took his class that we were able to accomplish that together. And around the end, he sort of spoke to us about continuing on in the future and realizing that there may be obstacles in our path, but just to keep it pushing and, keep that hope that his story really speaks of. So just sitting there, it was very surreal, to say the least, to have him as a commencement speaker. Very lucky.
That's pretty awesome to be a part of helping fulfill someone else's dream of being a commencement speaker. Kind of an incredible moment for everyone in the room. How many classmates did you graduate with, Amy?
Well, I think around 100.
100. So really small class.
Mm-hmm.
And what was that experience like being at such a small school?
I would say it was good. I think specifically because of the relationships that we were able to build with teachers, and they could easily remember our names, but also with peers and having such a small class, we were all able to get to know each other. So it was kind of like graduating with a little family. Well, a bit bigger than a little family. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, that's what we are at Yale. Even though Yale is a large institution, we are very much a Yale family. And when we do these Yale Alumni Live episodes, we see just how interconnected the community is. So my friend Dwayne is here. He's still having little trouble. So Dwayne, ready? If you're looking right at Instagram and you're on your phone, on the right-hand side, there should be a little bit camera. And if you click that camera, you should see that I've sent you a request to join. So we're going to try again and see if we can get you. And if not, you and I are going to text, and then we'll get back live on in 5 minutes. Right, Amy? We're going to just make it work.
Yeah, of course. Things happen.
Oh, my goodness. So, Amy, you and I talked while we're trying to get Dwayne in here. While you and I talked, we were talking about the impact that Yaleys have on the New Haven community. And next week, let's give like a little bit of a precursor to who's going to join us next week. Another person in addition. Oh, yes. Oh, now cliffhanger. There you are, Dwayne. Glad you could join us.
So the problem is, I thought that you could do it on your computer. You could only do it on your phone.
Yes, sir. Everybody, gets very confused by Instagram, but we are glad you are here. Thank you for sticking with us. I know Amy is thrilled to be able to welcome you to Yale Alumni Live. So thank you. Thank you for hanging on. So I'm going to actually turn our conversation over to Amy because Amy shared with everybody her connection with you and how she had met you previously. And so she's really going to lead our conversation today. So Dwayne Betts, graduate of the Yale Law School, class of 2016. Amy Rodriguez, my Echo intern. Amy, feel free to take it away, and I'm here to add some additional questions or field questions from the audience if anybody has them. So, Amy, over to you.
Thank you. Hi, Dwayne.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, it's going great. It's going great. I want to thank you again for doing this. It's a wonderful opportunity, and it feels amazing that I actually have a chance to have a one-on-one with you. My first question today is just tell us a bit about your life and experiences before you went to Yale.
Yeah, I was old when I went to Yale, so I had a bunch of life and experiences. I had a bunch of I got married, got married. We had 2 children. We have 2 children. That is a really interesting question because I was 33 when I went to Yale, which means in a lot of real ways I had imagined that I already had a career and I was good and that I was definitely finished going to college. But you just never know. And I was in a room once and it just hit me, I should go to law school. It was things I wanted to do that I had been working on as an advocate that I couldn't really do as a lawyer. Oh, so yeah, it was fascinating because it was also an opportunity for me to be with my young folks more as they were growing up, and they grew up running around the hallways at a school while I was a student, and then of course I've been a writer, and it's like poets don't go to law school. It's absurd because lawyers tend not to have a facility with language, but they have a great facility with language, but sometimes the law obfuscates things more than it reveals it. But it was cool. It was great. I love being a student at Yale so much so that I went back and got a PhD, which I am almost complete. Although almost in academic speak is like it could be tomorrow or it could be never. You just don't know.
Wow, thank you. I was also curious if you could tell us a bit about your life in high school.
You taking me all the way back to memory lane.
Yes.
You must don't know I'm 40. My life in high school. It's so funny. My dad was the class president and of his high school class, and I was the class treasurer of my high school class. But I didn't get to serve out my term. Like a lot of politicians, I got into some trouble with the law. And but one thing that was funny because I turned my last book Felon into a solo theater piece, and theater is not a game. I spent the last 2 hours, rehearsing, and over the 2 hours we probably went over like 4 or 5 minutes of the play, which is wild. But I remember being a high school student and one day I went to a performing arts school. And I stumbled upon a theater program and thinking that this was for like corny people. And so one thing I've learned is maybe, you can never predict where you'll end up. And in some real ways, from those high school days of, never imagining myself being a lawyer and never really imagining myself being a writer and definitely not imagining myself doing theater. I've come full circle, and I'm doing theater, and I'm a poet. I would have said poets are corny back then. Some young people I know still say poets are corny, so maybe it's just poets are corny to everybody but poets. But it's been really nice to be able to make some of these transitions.
I was also curious about how you transitioned writing and poetry to law. Like, where did that decision come from?
I'm gonna say something. I mean, and that kid that asked me to do the graduation speech, she was pretty badass because she fucking asked me.
Yeah.
She asked me in front of a bunch of children, And I mean, I'm sorry, you're not a child, but you know what I mean, though, right? You are a kid, you know, like, and I wasn't, and it's like, yeah, I'm gonna fucking say no right now, so that for the rest of my life, these 20 students are telling stories about how I crushed their dreams and ambitions. And during the pandemic, it's like they was asked to give a commencement speech during the pandemic. What did you have to do? You were traveling? Like, where did you go? And so, but what's interesting, and I think about this a lot, is that you often don't know what you're gonna be and what you're gonna do. And I thought I was done. You know, I didn't expect to become a lawyer. I didn't expect to go to law school. And there's two things I want to say to you. I went to community college, and this is as far away from Yale as you could expect. I remember talking to a classmate saying, you know, we should do more to engage with Gateway Community College. And my classmate was like, well, why would we do that? It's not like anybody from community college is ever going to end up here. I was like, that this person didn't know I'd been in prison or community college. So I knew that I was about to radically change her perception of me and what's possible, either in a good way or in a bad way. But I think that the people around you won't often say or believe the way you need to believe. And I think that it was on a humble that made me think that Yale was possible. It was because I made myself proximate to it was at Harvard. You know, I got a fellowship there, and because I was now suddenly proximate to the institution, it didn't seem foreign to me anymore. You know, I had this fellowship, and so when I was deciding to go to law school, I would have never imagined going to Yale. One, because I was a poet, and poets don't go to law school, which is a lie. Monica Yoon is a poet. She worked for the Brennan Center, and now she's a lawyer. Brian Gill, I mean, she was a lawyer before becoming a award-winning poet. Brian Gilmore, another award-winning poet, is a housing attorney, and he got several poetry books. But it seems like it's not true. You know, I think Ilya Kaminsky is also a lawyer, and he won the Los Angeles Times Book Award this year. So, but the point is, it seems like you don't go from poetry to law in the same way it seems like you don't go from community college to Yale, or like I went to a state school. You don't go from a state school to Yale. But the reality is, you go where you want to go, and if there's no bridge there, you build a bridge as you walk. And so for me, becoming a part of the Yale community and shifting from like poetry to Yale was not shifting at all. It was doing a lot of work to find out, how do I maintain who I am in these different spaces that I find myself in, which meant that, you know, I was eating ramen noodles in prison, and I thought the shit was delicious. And we would throw in some, you know, peanut butter, or we would throw in some crushed crackers or whatever. And then I come home and somebody like, yo, you should get some ramen. What the fuck is wrong with you? I'm not getting no ramen. I'm not going back to prison. And they was like, no, Japanese ramen. I'm like, I know what Japanese ramen is, motherfucker. I'm not going back to prison, you know. And they's like, now let me show you. And then I go, and it's similar noodles, but the broth is steeped for 14 hours. Like, oh shit, this is not what hot water tastes like. And then they got like exposed eggs in it and green things I didn't have a name for. And my thing is, like, we all like prison ramen, right? And the question becomes, what are we willing to add to what we are to make it the fullest sense of this thing that we might not even know? Like I had no idea that I was a imitation Dwayne until I came home and started exploring new things and add new things to who I was, whether it was, you know, being an educator, or whether it was, you know, being a manager at a bookstore, or whether now I'm a bootleg librarian. You know, I literally build libraries, and I run a project where we build micro libraries and we bring them to prison. So I think, you know, all of those things sort of, some way, is my trying to answer your question.
No, I mean, that was like really great, and I relate to you in the sense that I don't like the idea that going to community college is shameful. I mean, coming from a family where my mom was really the first to go off and get her higher education and get that master's degree, I respect every kind of grind. You know, if you have to go to community college, if you want to go to a trade school, but I find value in any kind of education, no matter how you get it. But to go on to our next question, so knowing that you were interested in law and I understand that you applied to several other law schools. Why did you choose Yale?
I shouldn't answer this. It's traffic, so there's much less traffic at Yale. No, I mean, like, that's so funny. No, that's not it for real. It's part of it. It's part of it. But also Yale as an institution. I knew Tracy Mears was here. I was really interested in her work. I knew James Foreman was here. I was interested in his work. But also, this is like, at some point, all of these places are just like subtle differences that will have a profound impact on your experience. But nonetheless, the differences are kind of subtle. But I wrote this cat, and he works at his name is Eli. I can't remember his last name right now, blanking. But he used to run Above the Law, and I write this black dude, and he happened to be on vacation at that time, and I wrote him a really specific letter about being a black student at Harvard because he went to Harvard, and about and I was like, I got a child, and I'm kind of older, and I'm not sure how old you were, but I just have questions, and I get a I'm on vacation email back, and I was like, damn. It was like 2 in the morning. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to email this partner the same email. And so the other editor who worked for them, right? I sent him the email. Now this dude is he is like he's not black, and I sent him the same fucking email. Like I was like, look, I'm black. I got it. Yeah, and he say, I can't answer your question. I don't know, And then it was like 2 minutes later, he was like, but I reached out to somebody. And you should talk to him. And it's somebody who was working at the University of Chicago. And he says, call him at 8. I call this guy while I'm at the playground with my children, and they running around, and I'm talking to him. And he's like, yeah, I hadn't talked to this dude. His name is David. He wrote a novel too, but I think he still works at Above the Law. But he's like, I haven't talked to this dude in 15 years. But I just got this email from him saying that, I might have something to offer you. I heard you got into Yale and you might have some questions. And I just thought any institution that allows you to you meet somebody and establish a bond. His name is David Latt, and the other cat was Eli Mistu. So I wrote Eli Mistu, and then I wrote David Latt, right? And David Latt is like, I mean, these dudes got jobs. They sort of like important figures. They got their own life. But this guy said, man, I haven't talked to David since law school. But anybody who like David said I should look out for, I'm just gonna go in. I was like, I'll call you and talk to you. And I thought an institution that would have somebody willing to take a call from an incoming 1L. First, I thought anybody, David Latt, Chinese American cat, gets this email from a random black dude to ask him a bunch of questions about black people. He could have been like, this dude clearly did not read my profile. He didn't Google my picture. He just sent this to anybody, right? One, he was extremely generous by reaching out to somebody who he hadn't talked to in 15 years. And then that person allowed me to call him at 8 o'clock in the morning. And that person was like a VP at the University of Chicago or something. And I just thought any institution that would have two people willing to do this for me was the place I wanted to be. So.
Wow. I do have to say, people who go to Yale, who I've met through different programs that I did, specifically on exchange, I've always known that they were very humble and just so kind and so willing to give back to the community. But
I don't want you to think that we all like that, though.
No. At least the ones that I've met, I guess I've met a good bunch, which is good to know. But since you've graduated from Yale, what have you been doing?
Yeah, I worked for a judge. I worked for a great judge, actually. I worked for Judge Theodore McKee. He's a Third Circuit court judge, Third Circuit Court of Appeals, and that was a wonderful year. I mean, it was like really humbling, actually, to be able to work for somebody who had been a judge for quite a long time, but a really distinguished, skilled jurist, black man. It was one of the heights of my experience. My co-clerks were fantastic. One of them, his birthday's today, Anthony Carissimi. But that was wonderful. And I worked as a public defender for a year. Not really a public defender, but I worked as a defense attorney for a year. And I truly enjoyed working in a New Haven public defender's office. It was really challenging, though. And then I went back and joined a PhD program. I wrote some, published a book, traveled a little bit, and wrote two big pieces. I think one about myself in the New York Times Magazine, and one about Kamala Harris in the New York Times Magazine. And then, then I started this project, Freedom Reads, and Freedom Reads is all about this notion that freedom begins with a book, and that prisons, COVID makes it more obvious. These guys men, women, and children haven't been able to have visits, access programs, go to the library in more than a year. And I had developed this project before COVID, thinking that one of the things that bothered me about prison is that there's no beauty in prison. And Mass Design has this notion that beauty is justice. And so I partnered with them, and we developed, I'm curating the 500 book Freedom Library, but then we also developed and sort of designed these like stacks for prison. And they're a bookshelf and scene arrangement that create a place and a space that could exist inside of a prison housing unit so that people can have access to books constantly. But also, I've been on the phone with people who are in prison, and they're like, oh, shot, man, somebody getting stabbed. And we're accustomed, from a prison cell, mostly what you see is violence and desperation and people trying to survive in the midst of that. And I feel like this project is about giving people something extra to help them try to survive while they have to be there. And I've been working on that for like the past year. And it's radically changed my opinions and thinking about a lot of things, because I'm constantly working with the Department of Corrections. I'm having to work with top level down. And when I was inside, I didn't talk to COs. I didn't talk to, we didn't talk. And an unpredictable experience, because this is not what I expected to be doing. And I've gotten like 5 friends out of prison, which is dope. And that's like the illest humble brag. That is some Yale shit right there, though. It's like, yeah, I've been doing all of these great, amazing things, and here's my extra slice of bread for you. But forget a humble brag.
I actually took a law program when I was at my high school, and we watched the documentary The 13th. It was like eye-opening for me, because I had never really acknowledged what happens to people who have been incarcerated, what happens after they get out. Even though I've had people in my family who have been incarcerated, who are currently incarcerated, it never really crossed my mind of how dehumanized they can be, how hard it is to really get out, because it's almost like a system. Sometimes people find it very difficult to break that cycle of getting out and then going back in. So I think that's really why I gravitated so much to your story, seeing how you're now in this position to give back to people who are being incarcerated now, but also kids in New Haven, kids in these local schools. How does that feel for you?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think I would say, like, you come home and you feel like you have to hide, and you feel deeply alone. And it was a lot of times where I imagine I would tell nobody that I'd been in prison, and I had to make a conscious choice that it might be something meaningful in telling the story, and might be something freeing. And you asked me how it feels, and I think one of the ways it feels is that it's humbling to know, and maybe it's a little sad too, to know that from this horrible thing that I did, I pulled a pistol out on somebody, several people, and I robbed them, and I left them with probably deep emotional scars, right? It's a humbling thing to know that out of that I've made something meaningful, but it's also a tragic thing to know, because I know too that every time I had these conversations, I realized that those folks might still be walking around with those scars that I created, right? And so part of it is duty. It's like, it's not like I do feel good, because you want to find ways to feel good about yourself, but part of it is just duty. It's just like, what is my responsibility to the world? And you happy to feel useful. One of the things I learned in prison really is that when you are useful to others. I'm still sarcastic. I'm like still kind of a smart aleck, probably more of an asshole than I was when I was 16. But I learned very early on in prison that like if you care about other people, they begin to forgive you some of your worst excesses, as long as those excesses aren't motivated at hurting people. And I became an educator when I was like 16. The teacher said, "Look, I need you to come to school every day so you could get your high school diploma, but I just can't have you coming in here working on your own thing. You have to be a GED tutor." And I was like, "I'm 16. Dude is 25. What the fuck I'm gonna teach him?" And she was like, "Being a teacher has nothing to do with how old you are." And I think from that moment, I first became an educator, and I like to think that I'm still an educator, and it feels like I'm doing something of value, with my life. Like my homies inside would be like, "I told you he was gonna be a professor. This motherfucker Shaheed done made it. He got more college degrees than felonies there, and he still take my phone call." So
Could you speak more about maybe a specific teacher or a specific moment that really influenced you?
Yeah, I got one. I got one. That's like, so I'm locked up, and they tell you, if you get a GED, you can get time off of your sentence. And so I'm like, all right, well, I got to get me a GED, and I'm trying to figure out exactly like what I need to do to get a GED. And so I go to the school to talk to the teacher, and I wait to the end of class to talk to her. And class ends, and I walk up to her and I tell her, I want to enroll in a GED program. And she looks at me. I'm like 125 pounds, soaking wet. I'm like 5'6". And she says, "What classes were you taking in high school? What classes were you taking?" She asked me, like, "Were you in high school before you got in trouble?" I was like, "Yeah." She was like, "What classes were you taking?" And I ain't really understand the question. I was like, French 4, physics, pre-calculus, intro to C++. And as the list was building, my chest was getting big. I'm like, chemistry, and she looked at me, right? And then, good money says that I'm lying in that moment because I'm 16. And if I'm in a county jail, I must have did something fucked up. Like the system is some shit. But you don't end up in a county jail for jaywalking, typically, right? So I've either been accused of something horrible or accused and likely did something horrible. She looks at me and says, "You remind me of my son." The lady was white. That's like the first time in my life a white person ever said some shit like that to me. And I had a bunch of white teachers. But it is the subtle things that you do, when you think about race and class and culture. It's the subtle things that you do that make people feel seen. And I mean, it made me feel deeply seen. And then she, called. Then she went out of her way. She called the school. She got my transcripts. She realized that all I needed to do to graduate from high school was to finish my 11th grade classes and take 12th grade English. She enrolled me in a Virginia school. And I ended up graduating from high school a year early. Like I skipped the 12th grade and went to prison, which is not how my mama planned it. But I was like, yo, I'm in front of the judge. I'm like, "I got a high school diploma, Your Honor." And he was like, "I'm under no illusion that sending you to prison will help. But you could get something out of it if you want." And as devastated as I was by like him saying that thing to me, I was just so encouraged by this teacher doing so much for me when like she didn't have to. And it's interesting because I lost contact with her, but I don't think she did it to try to stay in contact with me. Like I did reach out to her when I first came home, and I think for her, like that shit was like not weird, but like I did it because that was my job, and I actually don't like you. What I mean? Like, she'd be like, "I knew you when you were 16. I don't know if I like you, but I got this whole life. I'm not interested. I mean, it's cool. I'm so glad you're home. I'm so glad you're successful." But like, she's like, it was like I didn't do it for all of those things, which was also beautiful. It was also like she might have been like, "Yeah, I'm really shy. You didn't know I'm really shy," and it's whatever it was. But the point is that she just did it because it was her job, and she didn't do it because I was like not arrogant or polite or any of those things. She was just like, "Damn, this kid looks like a kid." and he seemed to be smart, and he's taking the same classes my son is taking. And so that's one teacher that I think profoundly, um, seriously, profoundly changed my life. In some real ways. It meant that I didn't take the GED. I had a GED when I went out. It meant that I was able to feel different about myself, that I had this photo of myself in a cap and gown. And so what? It was in the county jail. It was a photo that signified, I'd be flexing with my Yale shit on, but I remember when I had the joint on in the county jail. And I think that both of those Shaheeds and both of those Dwaynes exist in this body. And I remember that. And part of the reason why that's true is because of her.
Wow. I mean, incredible, honestly. I know in the beginning we were hinting to my next episode that I'll be doing, and I'm actually going to be interviewing my teacher, Miss Plateau, who is a Yale alum, and for me, she was always very open to helping her students and always understanding. And I think teachers don't get enough credit for that. Sometimes they're even raising, your kids. If they're not getting adequate care at home, it's those teachers that listen to them, in the middle of class and having to take care of them. I have a relative of mine who has been teaching for most of her life and tells me all these stories of how far she go for those kids that she taught and how much of a bond they grew because of it. So it's been hard for her to sort of transition out of the school because they always give her so much. So that's the one thing that I admire about teaching, but also we forget you don't really have to be a teacher to be an educator. You can be a poet, you can be a writer, you can be a lawyer, you can be just a family friend.
You are really good at this.
Isn't she? I was just
Yo.
thinking the same thing.
Yo,
Thank you.
I'm like, man, she's
Thank you so
inspiring me. I'm like, yo, she just made me feel like I was somebody.
Thank you. Thank you. I am going to major in psychology, so I hope this gets incorporated in well. But let's see. I also wanted to ask you about Hopkins. Specifically, I was wondering if you're an actual teacher there or were you just a guest speaker for that workshop?
I am I was like a writer in residence. I am a writer in residence at Hopkins. And I think what was cool about the workshop is they really intentionally tried to reach out to the broader community and bring some of those resources from Hopkins to the broader community. But I just teach one class every year, and then I do a workshop, and I'll do another one probably in the spring, and invite folks from the community. I might do more than one, but I'm a writer in residence there. It's funny because I think that what we do is we find ways to touch the communities where we live, and I got some people who teach at Hopkins, and I had like kids that I coached basketball who go to Hopkins, but I also had kids I coached who go to local schools, and one of the things that I loved about the young lady asking me to be the commencement speaker is that she was able to get me into the New Haven schools when I couldn't get myself in. When I was a law student, I would go to a school or two and be like, I'm trying to come through and do something. And they look at me like, I was like, I'll come through, speak to the kids. And I was like, what you going to talk about? I'm like, oh, I went to Yale. And the thing is, I could have approached it in a different way. I could have had like a really carefully prepared pitch. I was like, I fucking live down the street, though. I mean, I'm not, y'all ain't paying me. I'm not like about the. And so what's interesting is like students have that ability to bridge the gap and help make conversations happen that sometimes adults, writers, teachers, people in the community are willing to have. But frankly, it was just too much for the institution to say, Dwayne, prove to us why you should be here. I was like, I'm not about to do that. And I had a conversation with you and you didn't take me seriously. So, I feel bad about that. But she went that steps and on the fly too, just like, oh, this guy's a poet. This class was pretty cool. I guess he'll be good as a commencement speaker. I don't know. Should I ask him? And she thought all of those things over the course of an hour and just was like, let me ask him now, which is unbelievably brave because I had been like, you just don't know what somebody will say. So I think that your role and what you're doing right now is extremely important because you remind me of why it was important to show up there. And so, so congratulations to you. And honestly, if I could ever do anything Like one of the other things people learn, my whole life changed because somebody wrote me a letter of recommendation, and I had met this cat and talked to him for less time than we've talked. So yes, you should know your recommenders well, but that does not mean that it always has to be the case. And that letter of recommendation that I mean, it was just like, yo, it was just like the young lady did. I was like, damn, this is my one shot. I was like, yo, will you write this letter of rec for me? I mean, I'm gonna send you my book. You could check it out. I know we don't know each other that well, but he looked at me like, this dude don't even know my middle name. And he was like, yeah, send me your stuff. And it changed my life. So I think if you ever need anything anyway, just make sure you know my email address probably won't change. I won't say it over Instagram Live. But as long as I'm connected to Yale, it'll be reginald.betts@yale.edu. And always feel free to reach out to me and ask me for advice, support, all those things. I'm sure you won't need it as good as you were today. But it's always nice to know, though.
This has been, I hate to stop this conversation, but I just need to thank both of you, to Amy and to Dwayne. And Amy literally did what you just described, Dwayne. She's the one who connected you to me and Yale Alumni Live. And I'm just so grateful for this opportunity to be here with both of you and be a fly on the wall, because that's all I was today, listening to your stories. I am beyond inspired by both of you. Without words, so grateful for your time today, both of you. Amy, do you have one last question for Dwayne?
Yes, I do. So for people who may be listening now, aspiring poets, people who may be at a crossroad, do you have any words that you would like to share to them?
Yeah, I'll say two things. Because somebody was like, damn, they was about to email me. You should feel free to email anybody you had an email address to. And I think you give everybody one follow-up. I mean, I think that and then maybe you follow up again a year later or something, because sometimes people inboxes are flooded and they just don't get to it, or they busy and they just don't get to it. Don't take it as them being an asshole though. So when you meet them 6 years later, I think just show them the same kindness that you hope that they would have showed you, because maybe they didn't see it and they didn't get to it. And then my advice for any young poet is, any young poet, any young writer, any young thinker really, is you live in a lane of your particular interests, but be willing to read deeply in areas other than where you're particularly interested in. In one way, I didn't really know about academic articles when I was like 17, 18, 19, 20. I mean, one way to read deeply into an area is to take your time and read deeply into one thinker. So take Glenn Laurie and read 2 or 3 of his articles, and don't just like listen, like you listen to a podcast. I think like Econ Talk is a great podcast where he has these really deep hour-long interviews with writers, and you could get a lot of information about like Range. I forgot, Epstein wrote this book called Range, and when I listened to the podcast about it, I learned a lot about the book. But then I read the book, and my point is that you want to just find opportunities to read deeply outside of your specific interests, because that'll influence, but it'll also influence how you develop. So I would just say that, stay curious.
Thank you both so much. This has been an incredible 45 minutes of conversation. Such a pleasure to be here with both of you. I know everybody that's been watching feels the same way. We've had people on this whole time, so thank you for your time, both of you. Amy will be back next week with Leslie Blitto, her teacher from Metro, talking about her experiences as a teacher in the New Haven community. Dwayne, thank you so much. Amy, you're amazing. Have a great day, everybody. See you next week. Bye.
Bye.